Good morning. It's Friday with the Fry Guy. I'm hoping your Friday is off to a great start. Today, Aplington, Iowa is the subject, and we're going back to history to 1918. It includes my grandfather, George Frey, or to us family members, he was known as Opa, which is the German way to say grandpa. Headline: Parriot Bridge train crash kills 6. Many others injured. Aplington, Iowa is a small town surrounded by a strong farming community as it is today, with the town merchants supporting the farmers as well. Over 100 years ago, a part of some tragic history took place. It was Friday night, May 28th, 1918 in Aplington, Iowa. George and Johanna were at a graduation commencement in the local school. It had been raining hard all afternoon prior to the commencement, and it accumulated to around 11 inches that afternoon and night. George thought it might be a wise decision to wait out the torrential rainfall, for he had about a 2-mile ride home with his horses and buggy. The storm began to let up, and George, leaving Johanna behind at a relative's house, finally decided to leave towards home around midnight or so. And George nearly got home when suddenly the horses stopped and were quite disturbed. Curiously and cautiously, George stepped off the buggy with his lantern and noticed that the excessive rainfall caused flooding around the approaches of the bridge, and the crossway was pretty much washed away from the flooding waters. Lucky for the horses to notice that something just wasn't quite right. George decided to turn the horses and wagon around and head back east to Aplington with hopes of possibly returning home the back way and come home from the northwest. However, when he arrived at the bridge on the north end of town, he had noticed it had also been washing away from the flooding waters. So George turned the horses and buggy around again, heading back to town where he had ran into a friend of his, Mr. Olson, not too far away from the train depot downtown. While George was visiting with Mr. Olson, a brakeman from the train approached them and stated that number 11 had got into the ditch. Now, number 11 was a mail train. The desperate brakeman told George and his friends to please call a doctor at once. He said there are several people that have already died, and there's many more that are suffering at the site of the wreck. So George, along with John Ackerman, George Meyer, and Clark Sloan, started to round up help, which also included the town physician, Dr. Ross and Dr. Brochert. There were 6 people that died, including the engineer named William Alderman from Waterloo and 5 others from various communities. There were 32 more that had either serious or minor injuries from that tragic accident west of that small town of Aplington, Iowa. About a year later, Opa was asked to testify in court regarding that train wreck. Several years later, there was still some items left at the crash site, including a lunch bucket under some sand with prune juice in a jar, still well preserved, among a few other items. My father, Leroy Frey, walked my brother Brian and I out to the crash site back in the late 60s, and at that time, wheels and an axle were still lying there from the crash 50 years earlier. Of course, I haven't been out there for years, but I've heard that the parts from number 11 are still there to this day. Parriot Bridge was named after descendants of the Parriot family, who were known to have donated over 2,500 acres of land between Aplington and Ackley. The railroad used this land to provide transportation to Aplington, Iowa to stimulate the local economy. The efforts of the Parriots and many other generous and ambitious people played a vital role in building the Illinois Central Railroad for the economic development of Aplington, particularly during the 40s decade when it was used to transport World War II soldiers home to their families. For many years, 2 passenger trains stopped in Aplington daily. The railroad was used to transport livestock to and from the Aplington sale barn, lumber to the Harkin lumber yard, and grain to and from S.L. Dilley's grain elevator, among other businesses and merchants in the rural Aplington community. The main street in Aplington is now known as Parriot Street, or to many as Highway 57. William Alderman, the engineer in train number 11, who had died in a crash, was buried in Fairview Cemetery in Waterloo, Iowa, and several family members of the men who were directly involved in the rescue effort still reside in the Aplington area to this day. For more on this story, you can find information at the Aplington Public Library, along with the Cedar Falls Public Library and Waterloo Public Library. With just a part of our local history, I'm the Frey Guy on Friday. Have a safe weekend.